When I say the name TA, people in my close circle, they've heard that name over and over again. TA. But who's TA? We've had such a rich and long friendship, and I met you while working at Kiss FM with JoJo on the radio. We were in front of Don Cuco's in Burbank. We were in your car, and you were previewing a song by Los Five for us. You were their longtime manager, but I mean, you've worked with Madonna, Alanis, Morissette, Wu-Tang Clan, the list goes on. So TA, or Terry Anzaldo from TA Entertainment, I want to welcome you on the Radio Flyer podcast. Thank you for being here.
Freddie, thanks for having me. And thanks for, that's fun to hear you describe how we met, what the circumstances were. And, you got to see me as a entrepreneur / manager as we were meeting. And you got to see my passion in what it is that we all do. We're lucky to be in this business called entertainment. And so again, I thank you for having me. I moved to Los Angeles in 1984 from Omaha, Nebraska, and I was in search of my life. The foundation for me was very important when I left. Everybody leaves to go to LA or New York. And for me, growing up in the Midwest, I was over 4 seasons. I was over the winters. So I was definitely going to LA because I was going in search to be in the entertainment business. But when I first moved out there, I was 90 hours a week and didn't know what a weekend was. And I was refereeing basketball in the gymnasiums. I was a travel agent from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday at university. Shout out to University Travel. So I moved to Los Angeles. And 3 weeks later, here comes my twin brother after the Al Jarreau concert in Omaha, Nebraska. My twin brother makes a pit stop in Vegas on the way out to LA and drops off an advanced cassette tape and gets hired on the spot. So consequently, he doesn't make it to Los Angeles. He's now already got an on-air personality job at a top 40 radio station in Las Vegas, to which later he stumbled into programming. And as I'm in Los Angeles refereeing basketball, bartending at Osco's in Beverly Hills, and being a travel agent from 9 to 5, working 90 hours a week, I'm on the phone with my twin brother, 3 times a day.
So you're refereeing, bartending, travel agent, and trying to get into the entertainment industry all at the same time.
Exactly. And around that time, I started managing my older brother's band. And we were doing top 40 cover gigs in the clubs in Orange County and Ventura County, because those were good paying gigs, really good paying gigs, because my brother and my cousins, they had to pay the bills as well. So they did top 40 cover club gigs. So they were playing, like in 1984, I mean, the music back then was the Purple Rain soundtrack, Shaka Khan, I Feel For You, Madonna's Like a Virgin. I mean, the music was aplenty. And I was bartending at Osco's in Beverly Hills. So the music scene was really, really, really happening. And as a top 40 cover band, the guys were playing great music and doing a good job of it and doing a lot of gigs. And I was managing them and getting them into those clubs while at the same time booking them at original music showcases. I'd call my twin brother up and say, I want to go to such and such concert. Can you call Columbia Records and get me tickets? Because I want to, the key was, it wasn't necessarily about going to the concert. It was about my brother setting up the tickets. So I had to go to the label to pick up the tickets. Yeah. So, hey, can you get me a pair of tickets to go see Kenny G? No offense, Kenny G, but I really was all about going down to Arista Records and picking up the pair of tickets more so than I was about going to the Kenny G show.
Right.
I wanted to see the bells and whistles and the sex, drugs, and rock and roll inside that building that actually wasn't happening. Yeah. But the music blasting out of everybody's offices and posters everywhere and people banging the phones and just, I mean, it was just, that was me. That was right up my alley. Yeah. That's why I moved to LA without even knowing it. So from 84 to let's say 87, 88-ish now I know what I want to do. So I'm torturing my twin brother every day to set me up to befriend me with all the LA record people, Randy Austin. And Randy Austin is the son of the legendary Mo Austin, who built Warner Brothers Records and brought back and launched the legendary Reprise Records with Frank Sinatra. But he signed all the greats at Warner Brothers, from Prince to so many others. And he was a legend. And here I am all of a sudden with friends with his son. And I was like, Randy had been in the business and he's a big executive's son, and he was kind of a party animal and I was like his runner. I would call in bets for him because we both love football, and I had a bookmaker. So I'd call in bets for him. Don't tell anybody, but I'd go get marijuana for him from time to time. I just never knew what was going to happen when I was at his house. And one day he's playing me an advance recording of OU 812 with a band called Van Halen and their brand new singer, Sammy Hagar. And it was just a different time back then when you could listen to music that early before it actually came out, pre-digital and all that stuff. And so I used to beat the crap out of Randy, and I used to hang out with him as much as I could. And so many other promotion guys, shout outs to too many that I could name: John Klein, Bob Freimeyer, Sharon White, so many of them, Tammy Shawn, so many of them tried to help get me a job. And one day I got a meeting with RCA Records, and I thought maybe they would give me a shot in Denver. There's no way they're going to hire me in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But I got a 1,000,000 to 1 shot. RCA Records hired me to do promotion in LA in 1990. And so here I am in the record business. And we were doing promotion for Jive Records. Their biggest artist at the time was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They had a new song coming out called Summertime. And I took that thing and I just ran with it before it was even a priority on our schedule for release. And I took it to Power 106 in Los Angeles, and I took it to all these stations across the country. And I'll never forget, it was probably like June 20th, and I'm on the phone with a program director named Bill Richards. And so I remember calling Bill Richards up and saying, "Hey, Bill," and Kiss wasn't playing the record at the time. And of course I wasn't like really leaning on him, but I figured they'd just get on the record naturally. I said, "Bill, you know what today is, don't you?" He says, "Yeah, it's Tuesday." I said, "No, the date. You know what the date is?" He's like, "Yeah, it's like June 22nd. I said, "You know what June 22nd is, Bill, don't you?" He says, "No." I said, "It's the first day of summer. This record is like blowing up." And so he added it that day. And, I started getting the confidence to be able to have those kind of conversations with program directors like, Bill Richards and,
how has your life changed, not just professionally, but personally too? Living in LA.
Well, I was like the lowest paid local in LA at the time. I started at 38,000, and most of my colleagues were probably making 60 at the time.
Yeah.
But I knew just to get in the door, when they asked me, "How much did you want?" I said like 35. They said, "We'll give you 38." And within 6 months, they promoted me up to 45, and then they moved me up to 60. And I never had to ask for a raise.
Right.
So even though I started really low, 35,000 for 20, I was like 28 when I finally got my shot. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough for me to like, okay, now I don't have to sweat.
Yeah.
I got this job with no experience whatsoever. But what they saw in me was the passion and the personality, and it's kind of like a relationships business. You're only as good as the music and the artist that you represent.
Yeah.
However, you got a good relationship with Freddie Rivera, who's a program director at Kiss FM or wherever, and he trusts me that the records that I'm bringing him, and when I bring a record to you, this is a smash. Maybe this one not so much.
Right.
And so there's a trust factor there.
Yeah.
It was comforting knowing that I had a car allowance, because with my salary, I got a car allowance and an expense account. So that was great. But the stress was, man, am I managing my time enough? Because it doesn't seem like I'm getting enough done. Plus, I had a couple of bosses that were like kind of cracking the whip on me and being real difficult on me and kind of stripping me from my confidence. And early on, like I was stripped of my confidence. And I was 3 months in, I had to call my boss and say, "Boss, the guy that you hired on the spot in that interview, I'm that guy, but I've been struggling, and I maybe just a little bit more freedom and a less, take the collar off me and let me run on my own and let me make some mistakes on my own." Okay, you got it, but you're going to sink or swim on your own. And the records started coming in. And the first one, who your viewers have never heard of, was a female artist by the name of Tyler Collins. And we had a song called "Girls Night Out," and it went all the way to #1. From there, we signed a deal with Stevie B, and out of that deal was a #1 single called "Because I Love You" that I was very instrumental in telling RCA New York, "Wait a minute, you're putting out the wrong song. I've got a station in Riverside called KGGI that you're very familiar with that was banging the crap out of an album track from our Stevie B album called Because I Love You. And it was #1 phones every single night.
Right.
New York says, this is the next single we're going after. I said, no, we're making a mistake. We're making a mistake. We should go after Because I Love You. We put the record out. The record went to #1. At that time, R&R Magazine was the Bible. Them and Billboard were the Bible. Yeah. Because I Love You froze at #1 during the holidays. So there was no activity the last 2 weeks of the year. And so consequently, the chart froze with what it looked like, 2 weeks before December 31st. And so it got to sit there for like 3-4 weeks at #1. I started getting all this confidence, man. And then the next thing in 93, 94, we had artists the likes of SWV, which is the Sisters with Voices. We had 4 #1 singles with them. And as I was explaining earlier on how the top 40 format split into 2 formats, right. I became vice president of promotion for the rhythm crossover format, which is the Power 106s and the Hot 97s in New York of the world.
Yeah.
And even KG.
KGGI too, because I mean, Stevie B, SWV, they were huge on 99.1, huge.
Right. Enormous. And the artists that I got to, quarterback their projects at that time that I'm very proud of was in fact SWV's Sister with Voices.
Yeah.
And then the Wu-Tang Clan, Enter the 36 Chambers, which was, we didn't get a ton of radio play, but the radio play that we got is what was in the biggest markets in the country, and anywhere from the R&B station in Los Angeles called The Beat to Power 106 with our boys, the Baker Boys, and in New York with Hot 97 with Funkmaster Flex, and of course Dr. Dre and Ed Lover in the mornings, and my dear friend Steve Smith. And
Wu-Tang Clan, did they do better in the East Coast versus the West Coast? I mean, what was that like?
We were in the middle. It's a great question. Certainly most people that are into the history of music and how it evolved into hip hop are familiar with, Biggie and Tupac, and they both got killed. And why did they get killed? Does the youth understand that, there was an East Coast, West Coast movement going on at that time as well? And both of their deaths is a product of what was happening between the East Coast and the West Coast. So per your question, it absolutely was happening. The Wu-Tang Clan is from Staten Island. So obviously Hot 97, a New York City radio station, led the way on Wu-Tang Clan, as did the stations in Boston and Philadelphia and Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And hip hop was breaking big time in these markets without airplay.
Yeah. Was a band or a group like Wu-Tang Clan, were they coachable as far as, hey, you got to be here, you got to do this?
When the Wu-Tang Clan came out to the West Coast, and I took them over to the Beat, 92.3 The Beat, KKBT, great call letters of the R&B station of Los Angeles of that day. And they competed big time with Power 106. And I had Wu-Tang Clan over at the Beat, and we were cutting IDs. And I had Method Man in front of a music stand that had the ID sheet in front of him with the microphone right here. And he read off about 6 different IDs. And he's, I hope it's okay if I don't offend your listeners or your viewers. He was rolling a big fat blunt while he was doing this. While he was doing it, he was rolling, and he gets down to the final ID, and it reads something like this. I'll reenact it if I may.
Okay.
Yo, what's up, Los Angeles? This is the Method Man from the Wu-Tang Clan, and you're listening to 92.3 The Beat. It's all good. Oh, no, I'm not saying that shit. I'm not saying that shit. At the very end of the ID, it said, it's all good.
Yeah.
Which was a phrase that my mother says more than I say.
Right.
More than Snoop Dogg said when he coined that phrase during that time.
Right.
And Snoop is from the LBC, which is the West Coast, and Wu-Tang Clan is from Staten Island, which is the East Coast.
Yep.
And they wouldn't be caught dead saying something like, it's all good.
Yeah.
And that's a tame version of East Coast, West Coast.
Right.
The serious version of East Coast, West Coast is what happened with Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah.
When you talk about me coaching, I love this question. They got so big that Hot 97 put their Summer Jam show together, and they had it at the Continental Airlines Arena in New York. I'll never forget, you know, when you have these events in these big arenas, there's always a curfew. And when you do these shows for radio stations who have 14 different acts on their, you know, on the stage that day, man, that thing needs to run like turnkey mode. Because if it doesn't, you're going to be on act number 8 at midnight.
Right.
You know,
right.
And the curfew's at 11, and it's like $10,000 or $15,000 a minute after the curfew. Jeez. So it's got to be tight to the tight to the tight. That producer of that show's got to have it down. And we, as representatives of these acts on behalf of each record company that these acts are signed to, and because I was the promotion guy, my responsibility was radio. So it was my responsibility to get them there on time by dealing with management and what have you, and make sure that they get on stage on time. With the Wu-Tang Clan, there was 9 of them.
Yeah.
It's 9 guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Wu-Tang Clan's in the locker room, and there's 9 of them, and there's at least 100 people in the posse. And you're doing this to clear the smoke to try and find where your guys are. And the production manager says, stage manager says, Wu-Tang's on in 20 minutes. Okay, great. So I'm looking, and they're just scattered everywhere in this, you know, there's 100 of them back there, and they're just passing it. And they're fired up to be headlining in their hometown, but they're in party mode.
Yeah.
Like, right. They're not even in warming up their vocals mode.
Right.
Like, you know, Celine Dion would be doing an hour before showtime and all that. They're smoking and they're having a great time. 20 minutes. Okay. All right. Well, let me start grabbing each guy individually. Okay. You God, I need you in this stall. Method Man, I need you in this stall. RZA in this stall. Inspector Deck in this stall. You know, on all of them. Genius in this stall. Yeah. With their joints. Each one of them had a joint, and I put them in the toilet stall. You know, the wrapper. Right. That is 2 walls and you shut the door. And so I said, don't move. I put each one of them in a stall. These, you know, I'm just a skinny Sicilian kid from Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm bossing these guys around, but it had to be done. And, you know, as one of them would stray, I'd be like, okay, look, time out, everybody, pay attention. Yeah. We made it to headline Hot 97. Yeah. Congratulations. But guess what, man? If I can't get you guys organized right now, and there's a curfew, I'm telling you right now, the mic is dead. The power is dead at 11 o'clock. I'm looking, it's now 10:38, man. You guys got a 20-minute set. You're on stage in 2 minutes. But what about Dirty? I'm like, what about Dirty? Where is he? He's out in the parking lot. Old Dirty Bastard is out in the parking lot trying to convince the security that he's Old Dirty Bastard from the Wu-Tang Clan, and I'm headlining the show tonight. Okay. Sidebar. You're a cop in New York. Somehow, some way, you've never heard of something called the Wu-Tang Clan. And you got some dude out in the parking lot saying, I'm Old Dirty Bastard. Yeah. I'm going to be on stage. You're probably going to think he's crazy. Right. So there's no way Dirty was getting in. And I'm like, damn, man, we need to get Dirty in here. But it ain't happening, man, because it's impossible. Right. It like even back then, we didn't have these devices. Yeah. We weren't even texting back then. Yeah. This is 1994. So I got the 8 of them in the stalls, and I went to the stage manager. I said, we're good to go. He said, you got 2 more minutes. I said, great. So we walked from the stage back into the dressing room. I open up each door one at a time, like kindergartner students behaving like you couldn't believe. Yeah. Without Old Dirty Bastard, but they did a 20-minute set. And I promise you, at exactly 11 p.m., they cut the mics because my guys were still on stage screaming in dead microphones. Yeah. But we pulled it off. Awesome. And that's my story on that one. And that's got to be a great experience wrangling and trying to coach a large team like that of 9 people of Wu-Tang Clan, because after that, it's got to be easier, unless you have the biggest diva in the world. Because I'm thinking of Alanis Morissette, for example, because Alanis Morissette was huge, and you were behind Alanis Morissette. And how did that happen? And what happened between you and Alanis Morissette? Well, I'm going to tie Madonna into this story as well. My reputation was flourishing as somebody who could break records and so on and so forth. And so I had the opportunity to sit down with Freddie DeMann, who masterminded Thriller, with Michael Jackson by introducing Michael to the great Quincy Jones, and the rest is history. I'm in a meeting with Freddie DeMann, and he's basically interviewing me. And he says, you're from Omaha, Nebraska. And I'm like, yeah. He says, I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah. He says, I need to know that on a Tuesday afternoon, radio stations, as you know, do their final reporting to the trade publications and to the industry, what new music they're putting into their playlist on Tuesday afternoons. Okay. So Freddie asks me this question. Freddie, I'm sorry to make you sound so old school. And so I'm just, this is not against you, but this is the story. I need to know that on a Tuesday afternoon that you can get to 10 when it's 4:30 in the afternoon and we're sitting on 8 or 9. I need to know that you can roll up your sleeves and go get number 10 for us. And I was like, let me get this straight. You're from Brooklyn. I'm from Omaha. That makes you more passionate. That makes you tougher. That gives you more of an edge over me than we're sitting on 9. How am I going to go get 10? You have the edge over me because you're from Brooklyn and I'm from Omaha. How dare you, man? Uh-huh. I mean, I'm insulted, and B, I'll take on anybody, including you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
You're at Geffen Records. I'm at Maverick Records. And there's one more radio station that hasn't reported yet. I'm as good as my record, but I'll take me up against anybody. And to that, Freddie donned me the best promotion guy he ever seen one-on-one. And
that's
Freddie
awesome.
was a great promotion guy himself. And he really loved that part of the meeting. He said, man, you're a bulldog. So he started calling me Bulldog because Tommy Lasorda would call Oral Hershiser Bulldog. So when Freddie would call me Bulldog, that motivated me. And that really fired me up. So I go to meetings at RCA Records in New York, and I tell Freddie, hey, I'm, the label that I work for, RCA, we've got meetings in New York coming up next week. So I'm going to be out in New York, and I could actually take this record, that you want, that is becoming a priority for Maverick Records, and I could actually play it for Hot 97 if you want. He said, well, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But really what I want is for you to meet with Madonna.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. That's going to happen. Yeah, right. Go to New York. Our whole staff at RCA is, we're at the Macklowe Hotel, and we're just drinking up a storm in the hotel bar. And that's what labels do. That's what staffs do. They get together and they drink it up and they party up and they have a great time. And then they all go to their meetings hungover.
that doesn't sound terrible at all.
And go to showcases at night and stuff like that. It's just a fun time, and the camaraderie is fantastic, and it's just a good time. And so we were doing that until the wee small hours of the morning. And I get back into my room like at 3 a.m. and there's a message on my voicemail from Freddie DeMann's assistant saying, Terry, calling from Freddie's office, you have a meeting with Madonna at 11 a.m. at such and such and such Central Park West. And I hang up the phone and I'm like, oh, Jesus, man. I mean, I'm like, I better, be alert and awake and whatever. So I go to sleep and I wake up, sorely hungover. It's about 110 degrees outside. It's an August day in New York City. The humidity is crazy. You could cut it with a knife. And I go to her apartment at Central Park West, and I don't know, a 30-minute meeting turned into 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And it turned into, I have to be careful how I say this. I wanted to blurt out, she almost instantly became horizontal. And when you talk about Madonna, you got to be careful when you say something like that. I became her psych. Yeah. Because she's interviewing me and asking me questions. The conversation just evolved into her being stressed out about the pressure that Warner Brothers was putting on her to get her next record out, because I got to get and this is a quote, I got to get my fucking record out before Michael fucking Jackson.
Yeah.
Those two artists and Prince, those three artists were on top.
Yeah.
And they were competitive. Even though Prince was a Warner Brothers artist, Michael was an artist with a competitive company called Sony.
Yeah.
Epic Records. They were putting the pressure on her. And in those days, Babyface was producing the record, and he's in Atlanta, she's in New York, and they had to physically use airmail to send the recording parts from Atlanta to Madonna to Sound Factory Studios in New York.
Wow.
no emailing
Right.
MP3 files or WAV files or anything like that. It was actually UPS or FedEx. And she was frustrated because Babyface would tell her, you'll have it tomorrow. And tomorrow meant 7 days later.
Yeah.
And so she was frustrated and stressed out and all that stuff. And then finally she looked at her watch and she says, okay, you have to go now. I mean, I've got so many people. I have so many other meetings that are backed up and all that. And I said, great. And Freddie called me that night and said, man, Madonna really likes you a lot. And let's do this. Long story, even longer, I was under contract at RCA, and RCA was not letting me out of my deal. So for like the next 3 months, Maverick kept looking for somebody to hire while I kept trying to get out of my deal. And RCA kept telling me, we're not letting you out. We're not letting you out. We're not letting you out. During that 3-month period that I was trying to get out of my contract at RCA and hoping that Maverick doesn't find somebody to hire instead of me, I was walking down the hall one day to go take a bathroom break, and I walked by Bennett Kaufman's office, and there's some music blasting out of his office. And I pop into his office, and I'm like, what in the hell are you playing? Like, what is this? He says, her name is Alanis Morissette. I said, are you going to get it? He says, I don't think so. He goes, you ever heard of Guy Oseary? So this is the first time I heard of Guy Oseary.
Yeah.
And he's at Maverick, and he's going to sign this artist that this artist was blowing my mind as I was walking down the hall to take a peek. When I heard that song called You Ought to Know, it was a demo of You Ought to Know from Alanis Morissette. And it was so obvious. But that song, that demo that I heard out of Bennett's office there was a drum machine and it was more electronic.
Yeah.
When Guy signed Alanis and Glenn Ballard, the demo that they were shopping around town, around the industry, that everybody passed on, from the great Randy Jackson, who was at Columbia Records at the time. Randy Jackson, you know, the dog, right, from American Idol. He passed. So many other great record executives passed on what in fact was Jagged Little Pill, probably 92% the finished record. Because Guy got Flea and Dave Navarro and put a drum track on there and made You Ought to Know a rock record instead of this electronic sounding song, right? But the rest of the entire demo of Jagged Little Pill was basically finished.
Yeah.
And so when I left RCA and drove down Sunset Boulevard and down Highland onto Beverly Boulevard and down Beverly Boulevard to 8000 Beverly Boulevard and parked in the back and walked in the door, as I'm walking down the hall to Freddie's office to say, guess what? I'm here.
Yeah.
Walking towards me is this tall, lanky Guy Oseary.
Yeah.
And we were walking towards each other and we stopped like this. And I'm like, Guy Oseary, I'm Terry Anzaldo. I'm your new promotion guy. I said, Alanis Morissette. And he said, you know about her? I said, oh my God.
Yeah.
We're going to sell millions of records. He said, man, I love you already, because I'd never met him. So I'll never forget the day I brought You Ought to Know to Kevin Weatherly at K-Rock. And no offense, Kevin, I don't hear it. And Kevin had this CD player in his office at K-Rock when K-Rock was in Burbank.
Okay.
And he had this CD player that looked like a Porsche.
Okay.
Like it looked like the Porsche version of a CD player, yet the sound was the worst sounding piece of audio of all time.
Okay.
But it didn't make You Ought to Know sound bad. And he said, I don't hear it. And I said, oh, man, you don't hear it? Okay, all right. So I sent the record to all the other alternative promotion guys and girls at Elektra, at Warner Brothers, at Columbia, at Geffen, at Interscope, at every single label, and started getting my colleagues to talk about it. And so I just surrounded Kevin by having all these other labels tell him how great Maverick's artist, Alanis Morissette, was. Called him up. I said, I'm ready when you are, man.
Yeah.
He put it in and it just, it exploded from there, from the very first spin. And when I was at RCA Records, I had an assistant who was a real grunge head. She was into grunge music. And I'll never forget the first day that K-Rock played Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana. She came into my office and told me that she pulled over on the side of the interstate. This is before cell phones. Cell phones were just now starting. She pulled over on the side of the 134 and grabbed one of those yellow box phones
Yeah.
to call K-Rock to find out who the hell that artist was that just played. So I tell you that story because when she told me that, the same thing happened when You Ought to Know hit the airwaves. It just, after the first spin, it just exploded. And that's just an anomaly. That's not commonplace.
Right.
That's one in a million, you know, if that. And it just blew up from there. And I'll never forget the first day she came into the office, not shortly after that. And she was 20 years old. Okay. She turned 21 during the launch of the record. And I'm a twin and she's a twin. She has a twin brother. And we connected on that level. I said, what's up, twin? You're going to be busy because the record that you put out is going to be huge and you're going to get ready to work for the next year and a half of your life. Or how about the next 35 years of your life, the next 25 years of your life? Because it's been 26 years now since that happened. And the record exploded. And we ran everything through alternative marketing, and MTV was a big deal back then. And so everything that we did, You Ought to Know started with K-Rock, and we maximized at the alternative format. And then we even got Active Rock to play it. And then the AAA formats would play it. And then we would cross it over to Kiss FMs of the world. And I'll never forget when Dan Kiley called me, he said, this thing is too big. I have to put it on. Yeah. I got to put it in. So Active Rock and alternative hadn't supported female artists in years. I mean, years, since like a Pat Benatar. And now all of a sudden, here's Alanis just dominating the airwaves, not only at rock radio, but also at pop and beyond, 6, 7 different formats at once. She was exploding. I covered over 100 shows with her. My father was the mayor of Omaha. That is awesome. And so when Alanis played Omaha, we presented a key to the city to her and all that. That is awesome. I mean, I've got a picture with me and my mom and dad and Alanis with my dad handing her a key to the city of Omaha. So as a proud Midwestern Omaha-born kid who makes good out in California, however you want to say that or not, those are one of the things that just makes me really. I remember when I was living in Texas. I was really young, and my cousin was there, and he introduced me to alternative and grunge. I think I was just introduced to hip hop for the first time when I was young. Dre, Snoop, Tupac, and then he brings along a CD of Alanis Morissette and introduces me to it, and I thought it was just the most unique sound. And every time I heard Alanis Morissette, it reminded me of him and all the other music that he introduced me to as well around that same era. And it was a special time. The 90s, it was a special time. And at that time, was indie, quote unquote, indie music in existence or not yet? Because I know there was always the underground music and music that was not popular in top 40, but was there popular music that was underground, that was not mainstream? Yeah, that is a great question. For me, during that time, the indie movement was very much under the college radio umbrella. At Maverick, there was the Deftones. Those guys were like were like my little brothers. The difference between How Do You Break and Alanis Morissette and a Deftones is night and day. Yeah. Well, that kind of leads me into the next question, because Indie 103.1, you were behind that movement. I mean, it was so brand new to LA and the Los Angeles market. Everybody still talks about it till today, but it was such a brief moment in LA radio history as well. Well, and I knew when you brought up the term indie that you were transitioning into my history with Indie 103.1, but I think it was good that we covered that part of what does indie actually mean. When we launched Indie 103.1 was the time that term indie or indie music was becoming mainstream, yet it was still not the mainstream. Right. Michael Steele, who used to program Kiss FM, he landed this job to program this Entravision signal called 103.1. But that's where Groove Radio was. And if you're familiar with that signal, 103.1, it doesn't have a great signal. Right. So Roy Laughlin, I know Roy Laughlin. Roy used to be an upper management guy at Clear Channel / iHeart. And he had an idea one day. And he sounds a little something like this for your listeners that don't know who Roy is. What if I called up Intervision and just offered them $2 million to do the sales for that radio station, but we handle the programming? And at the time, iHeart didn't have Alt 98.7. At that time, they were still Star 98.7. They weren't even an alternative radio station at the time. So iHeart didn't have a product that could compete with K-Rock. Roy always wanted to compete with K-Rock and reversely help Kiss FM.
Yeah.
Right? Just impact the market, all to benefit the almighty Kiss FM at iHeart.
Yeah.
In doing so, he hires Michael Steele to be the program director. Michael Steele goes to Amoeba and buys $10,000 worth of CDs, all indie rock stuff.
Yeah.
Like Arcade Fire. Who?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every Ramones title.
Right.
All this classic punk rock intertwined with indie music.
Yeah. Put
it all together, and you got Indie 103.1.
Yeah.
So Michael calls me up and he says, I just got this job. You know, let's put some thought into it over the holidays, because I was landing in Omaha at the time for the Christmas holidays and all that. And he says, TA, I got $10 an hour for on-air talent in market number 2. Might as well be market number 1, because LA is the number 1 billing market in the world.
Right.
He says, what the hell am I going to do? I mean, I'm going to put myself on the air, meaning himself, Mark Solville, who was his music director. And how am I going to hire a night guy at $10 an hour? And how am I going to keep Mark Solville here when I can only pay him $10 an hour? I just don't know what to do. And I said, without missing a beat, I said, let's call Steve Jones. He said, Steve Jones, like the most common name in America, right? Or in the world, probably, right? Steve Jones, the only Steve Jones I know is the guitar player from the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
I know of is the guitar player from the Sex Pistols. I said, yes, that's Steve Jones. He goes, you know him? Because I thought maybe we can get Jonesy to come over and do a 1 4-hour shift. And being a Sex Pistol, he's just going to play a bunch of anarchy punk rock that we hadn't even heard of.
Yeah, like a specialty show.
Right? Exactly. So I said, well, Jonesy, I'm heavily involved. I'm consulting the station, and we want to get you involved. Can we come over and talk to you? He goes, sure. We go over there. He can't get off the couch. He's another meeting that I'm at where the star is horizontal. And I said, we want you to come over and just do like a 4-hour shift and just play a bunch of anarchy. He goes, like what? Like play whatever I want? Yes. Are you sure I could play whatever I want? Yes. Okay. He says, let me take this to a whole nother level. My British accent's not that great, so I'm not going to try. So he says, I've never had a real job in my entire life. How about if I come over and do a real job for you and be an on-air disc jockey for you guys?
That's awesome.
And we'll create a show, which later on the next day he said, we're going to call it Jonesy's Jukebox. And you guys are going to let me play whatever the F I want.
But Steve Jones was cool. He was cool enough to say, look, I haven't had a real job in my entire life. How do you feel about me doing this full time? And
we looked at each other. And went, hell yeah, let us go work on it. So we left his house and we said, well, back to the original problem, how this meeting happened. I got $10 an hour to pay people. Well, we need to go sit down with Roy at iHeart and say, we got an opportunity to have a real legend on this radio station.
Yeah.
So no offense to Roy, but I have to tell this story. We set up the meeting with Roy Laughlin and Steve Jones and his manager, shout out Anita Camerata, and Michael Steele and myself. And we go into Roy's office, and the first thing Roy says is, Steve, nice to meet you. How's Sid Vicious doing? And we're like, oh my God, are we dead? For those of your audience that isn't aware, Sid Vicious had been dead for like 30 years.
Yeah.
When this meeting was taking place. And so Jonesy had to inform this guy that we were meeting with, Roy Laughlin, that Sid Vicious is dead. And so the meeting got started off very awkwardly, but there's only one guy on the planet that can say that and get away with it and pull it off and everything be just okay. And that's Roy Laughlin.
Right.
Right. And so we started talking. And so we were able to put together a deal with Ford and get him in a truck and a couple of dollars, not a ton of money, but certainly more than $10 an hour. And we put the deal together. That was a really, 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 really fun time.
Why do you think Indie 103.1 didn't last longer?
The advertising rates are based on ratings.
Right.
And when you have a signal that doesn't cover Los Angeles County, like maybe Kiss FM signal does, or Real FM signal does, where you can hear them all the way in San Bernardino, it's hard to get those ratings, therefore charge a rate that can ultimately, make sense.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the FCC saying, you can't be involved, iHeart. So Entervision's going to have to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And Entervision just got to the point where, well, this was fun while it lasted. Let's, get back into Hispanic broadcasting, which is what we know and love. And so consequently, Indie 103.1 lasted about 3 years.
Right.
It was the funnest time I've ever had in my entire career.
You and I share a passion for radio, a true, hardcore, unbelievable passion for radio. I mean, I've built my life around it, and that's how I met you. There's one person that still seems to stick out and is still my friend, and that's UTA. I want to go back to the original center line of all this and how you and I started, how you and I became friends, and how you and I became co-workers and in the industry was Los Five. To me, it was like a pop U2. JP, Juan Pablo, had the vocals like no other. And I remember it was one of the first nights I ever got introduced to Los Five. You had a house in Burbank. You introduced JoJo and I to go to the backyard to see these young boys perform acoustically. And we sat there in the garage listening to Juan Pablo and the team performing, and we walked away like, "Oh my God, that was a unique experience." And the level of talent that the band had, including Juan Pablo, was through the roof, was incredible. And I think JoJo and I both knew that this band had something very, very unique. A star power that JP had was incredible. And they went far. I mean, Las Vegas, Miami. Talk about that, TA, because, that was a big part of how you and I met with the band.
Thank you for all of that. That was, those are good memories, man. And it is when you and I first met. And, I have so much respect for JoJo and what he's done over the years. When I had told you that my twin brother and I launched Good Guy Entertainment, and we got involved in reality TV, and and we started kind of expanding our boundaries above and beyond just radio and records. And we got involved in television, and we got involved in pop culture icons like Barry Williams, who I mentioned. And it was at that point where, my twin brother and I said, we want to do our own thing.
Yeah.
And the paycheck is nice when you do it for the man. And if you can do it for the man, then maybe you can do it for yourself. You just got to get your A&R chops up. Like, you got to find an act. When you work for the label brings you the act and makes them a priority, and you go execute the marketing plan. When you're on your own, well, you got to go find the talent.
Yeah.
I was managing a female named Christine Morel. Shout out to Christine Morel. And I got her a residency at the Lowe's Hotel in Hollywood. And she was just playing piano. And on Friday nights, she would invite musicians from Musicians Institute who were aspiring performers. And she would bring them up on stage and introduce them and host her own, not talent night, but just, it was her night that she would bring a different artist up, from Musicians Institute. And one night I was there, and these 5 young guys go up on stage, and they're all Latino, 3 Mexicans, 1 Argentine, and 1 from Brazil. And they were all from those countries.
Right.
And most of them had been studying at Musicians Institute, and they were calling themselves the Wavelength, which made absolutely no sense when you look at their makeup and their name.
Yeah.
It just absolutely no sense. But I fell in love with them instantly. And JP tells the story that I said something very corny to them that goes a little something like this. I don't believe it was exactly like this.
Yeah.
Because this is like the quintessential corny line that an executive would say to a young aspiring singer or act. My name is Terry Anzaldo, and I work at such and such, and I can get you guys to where you want to go. And I can promise you, I didn't say it exactly like that, but that's probably what he heard.
Right.
A young aspiring artist, something like that. And it was something like that, but it wasn't as corny as that. I promise you. When I met the Los Five guys, I said, why don't we get together and talk about that? I called them about a week after, and I said, why don't you guys come up to my house? They came up to my house. They performed like 5 songs live. I said, I want to manage you guys. So I set up a meeting with Ron Fair. Ron's a great guy, but we'll be his 5th meeting of the day. He's met with a million acts over the years. So don't be offended if he comes across as cold or whatever. So I'm prepping them.
Yeah.
Last but not least, I cannot with a straight face go in there and introduce you guys as the Wavelength. I just can't do it. If you're not a solo act, then your name is really important. And Los Five fits you guys perfectly. You're bilingual. So we're not Los Cinco, we're Los Five.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's bilingual. That says boy band, which is not a bad word. You are a boy band, but you're a unique boy band because you're actually a band.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, but TA. And this is like, the meeting starts like any minute. And we still got to drive up there and park and go through security and everything. Yeah, but TA, we're on the same wavelength. Same wavelength. I said, I got that. I got that when you guys told me what your name was. I got that when I told the story earlier in this episode. The drummer sticks out his hand like this and says, TA, I'm in. And the other 4 guys in unison, I put my hand on top. I said, we're Los Five? Yeah. They said, we're Los Five. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Los Five. We went to Ron Fair's office. I got goosebumps telling the story. And so we go over to Capitol Records. We go into Ron's office. TA, how you doing, buddy? Great to see you, man. Man, I miss you, man. You're looking good. Like, how you doing? How's everything going? Great, great, great. Hey guys, how you doing? What's your guys' name?
Yeah.
And one of the guys looks at me and goes, and then looks over at Ron and says, we're called Los Five. Ron Fair says, Los Five? Los Five? Your name is Los Five? TA, that's the greatest fucking name I've ever heard in my life.
Awesome.
And it was just, okay. The guys were trusting me that I know what I'm talking about. And the meeting's getting off. We were not going to go into that meeting and tell him that we were called the Wavelength.
Right.
And him go, the Wavelength. Okay, let me see what you got.
Yeah.
Instead, Los Five. He already loves us. They haven't played one note.
Yeah.
He says, guys, go out in the lobby. I want to talk to TA. 2 hours later, the guys are in the lobby. The secretary's knocking on the door. Did you want the guys to leave or whatever? Ron and I got so deep into it, we didn't even realize the guys were out in the lobby.
Yeah.
Because Ron said, TA, I don't know, man. I think they're great. I think they're going to sell out Staples Center. But after this meeting, you're going to take them to Epic Records over to L.A. Reid, and you're going to hike up the deal and all that, and you're going to get me into a bidding war. I said, Ron, when I set up this meeting, I told you, 1 meeting and we're doing a deal. Now, we're doing a deal. But if you pass, then the first thing I'm going to do is go see L.A. Reid.
Yeah.
So are we doing a deal or not? He says, look, I just started here. Let me talk to Steve Barnett, who was at Columbia Records in New York when Simon Cowell put these 5 kids together. Ron calls me back the next day. He goes, we got a deal. Let's put a deal together. So we put a deal together. And
so there was a deal then.
Yeah, so we did a deal with Virgin / Capitol Records. 1 meeting.
Yeah.
I'm working with these. I know these kids 2 weeks, and we already got a deal at Capitol Records.
Yeah. So
we start recording music, and Ron, as a president, is also a producer. So he had his hands on every single artist's project.
Right.
He'd do some work here and then put it on hold, and then go do some work with this artist and put it on hold. Then he'd work with us and put us on hold. And he chose a bunch of different artists, and then one day he got fired.
Oh.
And I went and met with Steve Barnett, and I said, Steve, we got the Brown One Direction. Let's go. I'm ready for you to prioritize the group. And he says, I don't think so. I says, hey, man, you know what? I really appreciate your candor. I'm not mad at you.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me. So I'm going to call Michelle Jubilee tomorrow, who's his head of finance over there. She runs the building. And I'm going to make sure that we get a release like tomorrow. Please do not hold me up.
Right.
I need to be able to start marketing my band without you guys, since you don't think that we're going to be as big as One Direction.
Yeah.
I do. Let me go work on my own band. You got to release us. About 8 weeks it took, but we got out of the deal. And the first thing I did was take a song called Mañana to Kid Kelly, who had been putting his blood, sweat, and tears into something called Sirius XM and created the biggest top 40 station in North America called Hits One. I witnessed it firsthand. When our record went on the radio, we had people calling us from all over North America saying, oh my God, we just heard you on the radio.
Yeah.
Not just one station.
And this was Mañana playing. This was the Mañana track.
Mañana.
Okay.
And Kid Kelly played it 1,200 times. That taught us how we're going to do this on our own. And we started making money. We put the record up through TuneCore.
Yeah.
Money started coming in. And then we started doing house parties for like $300 down in San Diego. And I was able to get that up to like 7,500. We were playing quinceañeras and things of that nature. One day I saw that a gentleman named Gonzo Ortero was leaving Chicago and going to Fresno to become iHeartRadio's head of Latin music. And he was going to be in charge of something brand new called Fiesta Latina.
Yeah.
And I called him up and I said, hey, man, we're living in Santa Clarita. We're about an hour and 15 minutes away from Fresno. Can we come up and perform for you? So I went up and introduced the guys to Gonzo Ortero. And for the next several months, I just started beating the crap out of him about, you got to get my band on Fiesta Latina.
Yeah.
That happened.
Yeah.
And so we went and did the side stage at Fiesta Latina in Miami, iHeartRadio's Fiesta Latina in Miami. And there was Tom Pullman,
right?
All 6'5" of him. And I don't ever remember him being that tall. Tom was at KRBE in Houston when we broke Alanis Morissette. And KRBE in Houston was a top 40 station that leaned alternative. They were like one of the first top 40 stations to take the number one records from alternative and put it on their radio station, like you ought to know from Alanis Morissette. So shout out to Tom Pullman. I definitely credit him on helping me break Alanis Morissette back in the day. I hadn't seen him in forever, and he's running iHeartRadio programming. And I'm like, Tom, how you been? I miss your ass, but let's not waste any time trying to get caught up. I want you to meet my band called Los Five, who are the biggest Beatles fans on the planet, as is Tom Pullman. Tom says, let's go meet him. So I introduce him to Tom. Tom starts asking him all kinds of questions about the Beatles. They're talking about abstract songs. They're not talking about Let It Be and Hey Jude. They're talking about songs that even Pullman had never even heard, and he was impressed. And so he saw them perform. And then afterwards, this is like November of 2015. And I'm like, Tom, come 2016, we got to do something big with iHeart.
Yeah.
And I said, what are we going to do? He goes, you guys need to join. You need to be a part of iHeartRadio's Rising Star. I hang up the phone and I'm like, I knew they were going to do that to me, man.
Yeah.
Man, I don't want my band to be a competition band. I don't want them to be a contest band. And I don't think we could be successful doing that. But I know if we don't do that, the next time I call Tom Pullman up and say, what are we doing with Los Five and iHeart? He's going to say, you should have done the Rising Star.
Right.
And so I don't want to be a shoulda, woulda, coulda. I did that for you. Now what are we doing?
Yeah.
A million miles away from thinking that we could win the damn thing. Well, we join it and we dive into it. I could tell that we had a legitimate shot.
Yeah.
So we went balls to the wall and we won the damn thing. And the next thing you know, we opened up the T-Mobile Arena. We were the first act ever to be on the stage.
Can I just say, I was there. It was at the T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas. I was in the front row watching our boys, Los Five. And this is what is this? The 18,000 seat arena like Staples Center or Madison Square Garden. It's of that size. Yeah. They're the first up. And it was amazing to have my phone out there like a fan recording JP and the rest of the boys perform live and open up the show. It was huge. It was huge.
Well, the artists on the bill that night opening, because the iHeartRadio's Rising Star gets to open up the iHeartRadio Music Festival. In doing so, and one of the reasons why I wasn't so high about this idea was because no rising star had ever gone on to become a household name. I reached out to Bob Pittman, who runs all of iHeart. I get on the phone with Bob. I'm like, Bob, Terry Anzaldo, I manage Los 5, your brand new rising star.
Yeah.
I said, Bob, you guys have never broken an act. You go get your 25 grand or whatever it is from Macy's and you get that campaign going and all that, but you never break an act. I said, I don't need Columbia Records to break my band, but iHeartRadio can break this band.
Yeah.
Dude, I need to be on the side stage out in the village. And, you know, John Sykes, who used to run VH1, is a big shot. He does all the TV stuff with Tom Pullman at iHeartRadio. Bob Pittman says, let's get John Sykes on the phone. John, let's make sure that we do as much TV stuff with Los 5 as we can. So we did a bunch of stuff with iHeart. And that night at the music festival, the acts were Los 5, 21 Pilots, Billy Idol with Miley Cyrus, Drake, U2. Los 5 had billboards attached to hotels hanging over the Las Vegas Strip. I mean, it was unbelievable. In the MGM Grand, there was a gigantic wall of their faces painted. We took pictures. It was unbelievable. What a coup, man. It was really, really, really fun. And I did the best work of my career with Los 5 because I did it with my own two hands, no help from another record company. I had no budget whatsoever.
Right.
We just worked really, really hard, had a lot of fun. And, you know, the key to the game is hit songs, period, the end. And we were one hit song away from being as big as One Direction. And I really believe that was going to happen. I think we had all our other ducks lined up in a row, but we just didn't have that hit song. And lo and behold, 5 young / dumb kids got mad at each other, got mad at me and quit. And I later moved on to start working with Eric Clapton and his Christmas record and great R&B singer named Ashanti. And, you know, I'm now a point in my career where I'm just being extremely selective. I'm consulting a handful of projects for some record companies, and I'm very patiently on the prowl for a Los 5, a Justin Bieber.
Juan Pablo JP, I know you still talk to him every now and then. Will he or the band or he ever resurface? And is there a chance that he could still have a career in music or the band? Your thoughts? My
thoughts are this, that Ishmael and Matt have their own little production project together called The Missionaries. And it's kind of like a mishmash of their names and their nicknames. And they've put out 6 or 7 songs and they're doing, you know, okay, not great. They don't have a combined million streams, but they're actively making records. Tomas, who was the drummer, was very happy to be a session drummer and bounce around from one rock and roll band to the next when we met him. Tomas was actually the replacement drummer because our original drummer got deported. He made a big mistake at the border one day. And so we had to find a new drummer. So we found Tomas. I think he's content bouncing around playing in other bands.
Right.
Hector, who is Ishmael's cousin, is actively making videos now. As a matter of fact, he's the videographer for The Missionaries for his cousin Ishmael and Matt. And he seems to be doing good work. And he was only 16 years old when we first started Los 5. Back to JP. JP did a season of American Idol after Los 5 broke up. And I think he made a mistake by not acknowledging that he's from a band that broke up that had a lot of success.
Yeah.
Instead, he came on as a Lyft driver. That opportunity for JP kind of backfired. It didn't work well for him. I think his song selections were bad. He'll tell you that himself. The exposure was great, but at the end of the day, TV producers will chew you up and spit you out. And I think they manipulated him, and I think they did that to him. I think he recently, then the pandemic hit, but I think he recently went down to Mexico and did the next season of The Voice down in Mexico City. He's a very passionate guy. I know he's not happy with the way things worked out with Los 5. And all he just wants to do is sing, 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 sing. and you complimented his vocals so tremendously. If there's a way for he and I to work together again, I would be open to that. But, you know, his talent is certainly there, but he would have to kind of reinvent his artistry and find some direction and ask me for that help. And we could start working again. Did I lose you? I just lost you.
I just got a low battery signal. Before this ends, I truly want to thank you for being my quote unquote manager, but more so just a real friend who has been helping me through a very transitional period in my career. No one has had my back bigger and more than the UTA. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And you mean a lot. And I'm very happy and excited to introduce you to everybody now. So now they know who TA is.
Thank you, Freddie. And you know I love and adore you. And I just appreciate talent. And you know, I'll leave with this. It's not really a nugget of a story, but it's the method to the madness on how we met. My foresight with Los Five was, okay, eventually I'm going to have these guys on the radio, and primarily, more importantly, on Kiss FM. And so let me reach out to JoJo, and I want JoJo to get to know this band, to get to know these guys, because 6 months from now, 12 months from now, even 18 months from now, if I'm fortunate enough to get a record on the radio at Kiss, JoJo already knows this group, and that will lead for some good talking points. In doing that, I met you, who JoJo had definitely taken under his wing as not only, you know, he inherited you as his producer, but it seemed like he was also taking you under his wing as an on-air personality, because you were doing overnights at the time, and in many cases filling in for him as well. I mean, Jesus, you would fill in for JoJo on nights on Kiss FM. That's a big deal. And so knowing that I couldn't always get JoJo, if we did a show up at Universal Studios or something like that, to get him to MC the event, but just have somebody from Kiss introduce my band. And it just became a natural evolution that you became that guy even more so than JoJo. A, you're more available, and B, this was part of your developmental process that JoJo had already been through for years and years and years. And I think it was a way, I think JoJo was allowing that to happen by not making himself so available. And so it just evolved into you being that guy. And in many cases, I would call you on a moment's notice and say, hey, we're at the Whiskey tonight. Do you need some content? And you'd say, oh my God, TA. And I have to tell you, you were so appreciative of the opportunities that I provided for you. But you have to know the reason why I've stayed in your life after Los Five is for 1,000,012 reasons. Because most schmucks will use you up and spit you out. They're not involved with Los Five anymore. So what do I need Freddie for anymore? Well, that's not who I am. I'm about individuals. I'm about people. I'm about real relationships. And you were always there for us. You're a great guy. You're a great talent. And I'm in the helping people business. I don't know why that's in my DNA, but I like connecting people together and then working with those people as well. I like creating my own productions and my own opportunities by introducing people. And I saw a guy like you who was down on their luck. I saw one of your mentors not explain to you, but, kind of give you a bad time about it, that you should have known yourself what some of the decisions that you made with the evolution of your career. And I felt that you needed somebody to kind of explain it to you as well. And so why not me? You're worth the time. And that's just who I am as a person. That's who you are as a person. And that's why we're, still buddies and still friends. And at the end of the day, still collaborating on both of our careers.
Well, TA, I'm very appreciative and excited to have you on the Radio Flyer podcast. I know we've been talking about it for a long time. And I hope this is not the first time or the only time that you're going to be on the podcast, TA.
Ain't I booked for next week?
Duh.
Hello. I thought I was booked for next week. Don't you got 4 more hours that we got to cover?